I'm Ashley Porter, and the house I grew up in is the very one I now serve like a maid in. My stepmother, Darla, orders me around like I'm her personal servant, while my own father watches in silence. But what they don't know is this house. It's mine. Before we dive in, where are you watching this video from? Drop your location in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The morning it all cracked open wasn't unusual, not by their standards anyway. The smell of burnt toast lingered in the air, mingling with yesterday's laundry and the shrill pitch of Darla's voice slicing through the walls. "It's already 7 a.m. and you're still in bed. Get up and make me breakfast." The door flew open with all the subtlety of a freight train, and before I could open my eyes fully, she yanked the blanket off me in one angry swipe. The cold air slapped my skin like a second insult. "I'm not your maid," I muttered, barely audible. But Darla heard. She always did. She stood at the edge of my bed, robe loosely tied, her hair in messy rollers and that smug curl on her lip she wore like armor. "What was that?" she snapped. I sat up fast, blood buzzing. "You're not my mother." It wasn't the first time I'd said it, but this time it came out colder, sharper. I grabbed a hoodie from the chair and pulled it on roughly, not even bothering with socks as I stormed past her. The hallway smelled like bleach and resentment. My father, Bill, was in the kitchen with his usual paper and half-burnt coffee, pretending like he hadn't heard a thing. That was his talent, turning silence into complicity. "Dad," I said, stopping just long enough to meet his eyes. "You really gonna sit there while she talks to me like that?" He didn't look up. Just muttered, "Just do what she says, Ash, it's not worth the fight." Not worth the fight. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from screaming. How many times had he said that? How many breakfasts had I cooked with clenched teeth while Darla sat like royalty at the counter? The kitchen table was still sticky from last night's wine spill, hers, of course, and someone had tracked dirt in from the back porch. The sink was stacked with pans she refused to wash. And me? I was supposed to get started on scrambled eggs like some apron-wearing ghost. I wanted to scream, to throw the pan through the window, but instead, I turned on the faucet and washed my hands like it was all normal. Because in this house, pretending was survival. By the time the eggs were done, Darla was scrolling her phone at the counter, acting like a queen in a crumbling castle. "About time," she said, stabbing at the plate like I owed her more than breakfast. I didn't answer. I grabbed a dry piece of toast and walked outside barefoot, the cold concrete grounding me in a way nothing else could. My heart thudded with the same rhythm it always did after one of her little morning invasions. But here's the thing. What they didn't know, what I almost forgot myself, is that this home, this very house, didn't belong to them. And someday soon they'd remember exactly whose name is on the deed. Later that day, the house was quiet in a way that made me feel lonelier than the noise ever did. I was back in my room, my sanctuary, my cell, trying to focus on folding laundry that never seemed to end. Socks, shirts, underwear. The small acts of keeping life together. Outside the window, our Kansas neighborhood looked like a photo in a realtor's pamphlet. Neatly trimmed lawns, identical mailboxes, neighbors walking golden retrievers like they were living the dream. But inside our house, it was all rot beneath paint. I could hear the rustle of my father's newspaper from the living room. He always read it like he was hiding behind it, his version of armor. I carried the folded clothes into the hall and paused when I saw him sitting there in his usual spot, recliner squeaking every time he shifted. I stood in the doorway, laundry basket in hand. "Dad!" He didn't look up. I need to ask you something." I kept my voice calm, though everything inside me felt tight, like stretched thread ready to snap. He turned a page, didn't glance my way. "Why do you let her talk to me like that?" He let out a breath, the kind that says, "Not this again." "Ashley," he muttered, still not looking at me, "you just need to endure a bit longer." Endure, like this was a storm I could outwait. I took a step forward, my voice sharper now. "That's not an answer, that's just you avoiding it." He sighed, finally lowering the paper just enough to meet my eyes. His face was tired, creased with years of silence and compromise. "It's complicated, honey." "No, it's not," I said. "It's pretty simple, actually. She treats me like I'm nothing. And you let her." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just said it like it was a fact because it was. He looked away. "She's just Going through a hard time, okay? Are you kidding me? I dropped the laundry basket at my feet. She's going through a hard time. He said nothing. I lost Grandma. You lost her too. But somehow I'm the one being screamed at to cook breakfast while she stomps around in my room like I don't even exist. Bill's mouth opened slightly like he wanted to argue. But then he just closed it and leaned back in the chair like the weight of it all was too much. I don't want to fight with you, he said. I'm not fighting, I replied. I'm asking why. Silence. In that silence, I watched him become smaller than I remembered. Like the man who used to lift me onto his shoulders at the fair was fading into someone I didn't know anymore. Someone who kept peace by pretending there wasn't a war inside our walls. I didn't want to raise you alone, he finally said. It was so quiet I wasn't sure I heard him right. What? I didn't want to raise you alone, he repeated, softer this time. After your mom, she was stability for a while. I swallowed hard. Stability that comes with yelling and humiliation. He didn't answer. I bent down, picked up a sweater from the basket, and folded it slowly. My hands were steady, but my heart wasn't. I'm not mad that you needed help, I said quietly. I'm mad that you forgot I needed you too. His mouth opened again, this time with something like guilt in his eyes, but I stood up before he could speak. I'll finish the laundry. Back in my room, the silence came back like a wave. The kind that doesn't soothe. The kind that drowns. I stared at the wall for what felt like hours, not thinking, just feeling the ache of being invisible in my own home. Then I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I opened the old wooden chest at the foot of my bed, the one with the little brass lock that no longer worked. Inside were photo albums, Grandma's albums. I pulled one out, flipping through pages of birthdays, holidays, bedtime stories. There was a picture of me at 6, sitting on Grandma's lap while she read Little Women to me. Another of us baking together, flour dusting both our cheeks. She had loved this house. She had made it warm. This wasn't how she would have wanted it to feel. She would have told me not to let someone else write the rules in my story. She would have told me that silence isn't love, it's just fear with good manners. I closed the album and placed it gently back in the chest. I wasn't sure what to do next. But I knew one thing, enduring wasn't enough anymore. I used to think birthdays were magic. When I was little, Grandma would make me blueberry pancakes shaped like hearts and sing off-key just to make me laugh. She'd hang paper streamers even if it was just the two of us, and I'd feel like the most important girl in the world. This year, my birthday felt like a funeral in disguise. It started okay, at least on the surface. I'd strung fairy lights across the backyard fence, cleaned the patio chairs, and baked my own cake the night before. Chocolate with raspberry filling. Grandma's recipe. I told myself it didn't matter that no one helped. I was used to doing things alone. By 5 p.m., I'd set up the little Bluetooth speaker and a few folding tables. Trish, my cousin from Mom's side, said she'd come. A girl from my English class had said maybe. I didn't expect a crowd, just a few kind faces. But when the clock hit 6, only 3 people showed up: Trish, her boyfriend Ethan, and Ms. Jillian, our elderly neighbor who brought a tray of lemon bars and told me I had Grandma's light in me. It was sweet. It should have been enough. But Darla was watching from the kitchen window the whole time, her arms crossed like I'd thrown a frat party on her rose garden. And when I looked up from refilling the lemonade, I saw her heading outside. Her heels clicked on the patio like a warning. Well, I guess when no one RSVPs, you get this kind of crowd, she said loud enough for everyone to hear. Looks like the pity parade's in full swing. I froze mid-pour. Trish stiffened beside me, and Ethan blinked like he wasn't sure he'd heard right. Darla smiled sweetly, like she thought she was being funny. I mean, who throws a party and forgets to invite anyone with a personality? There was an awful pause. Then Ms. Jillian cleared her throat and said politely, I think Ashley's done a lovely job. Darla tilted her head and raised an eyebrow. Of course you'd think that, hun. The silence afterward was thick and sharp. One by one, my guests made their excuses. Trish gave me a quick hug. You don't deserve this, she whispered. Then they were gone, and I was standing there alone. The sun was setting, casting orange light across the empty backyard. The cake was untouched except for one slice I'd cut for Ms. Jillian. I sat down on the cold patio step and stared at the frosting. Happy birthday, Ashley, written in shaky blue icing. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there until the bugs came out. By the time I came back inside, the laughter from the living room stung like vinegar. Darla had a glass of wine in her hand and was flipping through TV channels like she hadn't just humiliated me in front of the only people who cared to come. Bill was already in his spot at the table, poking at scrambled eggs like they were a puzzle he couldn't solve. I slid into the chair across from him and quietly took a spoonful of cold cereal. My appetite had shriveled with the last ray of daylight. Darla plopped down across from me, still holding her wine. She chuckled. "Your little party. Total train wreck." Her voice was syrupy and cruel, the kind of mean that hides behind a smile. I didn't look up. I just stirred my cereal and said softly, "It was important to me." For a second, the room went quiet. Even the television on mute felt heavy. Bill kept chewing, didn't lift his eyes. Darla scoffed. "Sweetheart, not everything's a tragedy. You just need to grow thicker skin." I set down my spoon gently. "You didn't have to say what you said." "What?" "That it was a sad little gathering." She smirked. "Well, it was." Bill reached for his coffee like this was all normal dinner conversation. My throat burned, but I stayed steady. "I didn't ask for much." Darla shrugged and drained her glass. "Then don't throw parties no one wants to come to." I looked at my father one more time, hoping, praying he'd say something. Anything. He didn't. He just kept eating, slow and deliberate, like if he avoided eye contact long enough, the whole thing would blow over. And maybe it would have. Maybe that's what they both expected. But something shifted in me then. Not loud, not angry, just steel settling into my spine. I stood, took my cereal to the sink and rinsed it clean. Then I walked to my room without a word. That night, lying in bed with the ceiling fan whirring above me, I thought about Grandma again. I could still hear her voice reading bedtime stories, still feel her fingers running through my hair when I cried over school bullies. She would have come to my party. She would have danced under the lights, even if it was just us. And she would have told me something Darla and Bill never would. That I mattered. The next afternoon, I found myself walking without much purpose. Kansas autumn was settling in, the kind that paints the trees like fire and makes the air smell like change. I zipped up my jacket and kept walking, letting the sound of leaves crunching underfoot drown out the ache in my chest. I hadn't planned on seeing anyone. I just needed air, distance, a reminder that the world was bigger than the tight-lipped silence of our house. That's when I heard someone call my name. "Ashley." I turned around, half expecting it to be a neighbor or someone from school. Instead, there she was, Trish, standing on the sidewalk outside a little local cafe, a to-go cup in hand and her eyes full of concern. She rushed over. "Hey, I've been meaning to call. God, that night was awful. Are you okay?" I gave a small shrug. "Define okay." She reached out and touched my arm. "Come have coffee with me, my treat." I hesitated only a second, then I followed her inside. The cafe was warm, full of wood tones and quiet music, the kind of place that made you feel safe even if you weren't. We sat in a corner booth, and Trish handed me a hot cup of something caramel-scented before I could protest. "You know," she said gently, "you didn't deserve what happened. Darla has always been a viper, but what she did to you that night, that was cruel." I nodded, keeping my eyes on the steam rising from the cup. "It wasn't just the party, it's every day, every single day." "I figured," she said quietly. We sat there a moment. The kind of silence that wasn't awkward, just full of unspoken truths. Then Trish leaned in, her voice dropping low. "You remember Grandma's will?" I blinked. "Of course, what about it?" "She left the house to you." My head jerked up. "Wait, what?" "She left it to you," Trish repeated, eyes steady. "I overheard Dad talking about it a while back. Grandma wanted you to have the house. She put it in the will after your mom died, said it would be your safety net." My pulse kicked up. "Are you sure?" Trish nodded. "Positive. I remember because Darla had a full-on meltdown over it, said it wasn't fair, that she was the one keeping things together. But it was clear Grandma wanted you to have it." The words settled on me like snow, soft, silent, and world-altering. I pressed a hand to my chest. "Why hasn't anyone said anything? Why didn't my dad?" Trish gave me a look. "Because pretending it doesn't exist means they get to keep control. Darla gets a free house and your dad gets to avoid conflict, same as always." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My mouth was dry and my mind was spinning. Trish reached across the table and gently touched my hand. "Ashley, this isn't just about a house. It's about your dignity. Your security. Grandma wanted you to have something solid, something that couldn't be taken. I looked down at our hands. Mine was trembling. I'd forgotten, I whispered. I'd completely forgotten about the will. Then remember now, Trish said softly. Because they're not going to remind you, and they're sure as hell not going to hand you the keys. A strange kind of calm came over me then, not peace, not yet, but clarity, like someone had just turned the lights on in a room I'd been stumbling through for years. I straightened in my seat. Thank you, Trish smiled. You were never the weak one, Ash, just the quiet one. There's a difference. Outside, the wind picked up and blew golden leaves down the sidewalk like nature itself was trying to sweep something away. I stood up and zipped my jacket higher. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That evening, I walked alone to the cemetery. The air was cooler now, dusk folding over the streets like a soft gray blanket. I carried a small bouquet of peonies, Grandma's favorite, and a heart full of thoughts I hadn't dared to speak out loud in years. The graveyard sat just beyond the edge of town, tucked between a grove of elms and a white picket fence that had long since lost its paint. I hadn't been there in a while, not since the funeral, not since everything had started falling apart. Her headstone was simple, just her name, birth and death years, and one small line etched beneath. Loved fiercely, rest gently. I knelt on the damp grass, arranging the flowers carefully. Hi, I whispered. Sorry it's been so long. The wind stirred around me as if she were listening, or maybe that was just something I needed to believe. I swallowed the lump in my throat and sat cross-legged beside the stone. For a long moment I didn't say anything. Just let the silence fill the space between us like she was still here, nodding, waiting, knowing. Trish reminded me today about the will, I finally said. You left the house to me. You remembered me. My voice cracked. I wasn't expecting it to hurt this much. I forgot, Grandma. I forgot you did that. I forgot I mattered to someone. A breeze swept through the trees behind me, and I closed my eyes, listening to the sound of rustling leaves, of birds settling in for the night. I let myself remember the warmth of her kitchen, the smell of cinnamon rolls, the way her arms wrapped around me when I came home crying from school. She never asked me to earn her love. She just gave it. Everything feels so wrong now, I said softly. Dad barely speaks to me. Darla, I stopped, my chest tightening. It's like I'm some burden they forgot to toss out, like I'm just extra. I placed my palm against the cool stone. But you didn't forget me. You saw what I needed before I even knew. You gave me something solid, and I didn't even realize it was mine. Tears slipped down my cheeks, slow and quiet. I wish you were here. I didn't expect an answer, of course, but I felt something then, a stillness in my chest I hadn't felt in a long time. Not peace exactly, but something gentler than rage or shame. Something like remembering who I used to be before I started shrinking myself to fit the shape of their expectations. I'm going to be okay, I said, almost like a promise. I don't know how yet, but I will. A memory came to me, one I hadn't thought of in years. I was maybe 7, terrified of a thunderstorm that rattled the whole house. I'd run to Grandma's room, heart pounding, and she just scooped me up without a word, wrapped me in her quilt, and whispered, "You're safe, baby, storms pass." Storms pass. I stayed there a while longer until the stars began peeking through the branches above. Then I rose slowly and brushed off my knees. Thank you for not forgetting me, I said, voice soft but sure. I won't forget me anymore either. I walked back through the gates with my head held a little higher. Somewhere behind me, the flowers danced in the breeze. By the time I got home, it was nearly midnight. The street was still except for the glow from our porch light, yellowed, flickering slightly, and the thumping bass bleeding through the walls of the house. I paused at the front steps, already dreading whatever chaos waited behind the door. Inside, the living room was a wine-stained mess. Darla sat on the couch, legs draped across the armrest like some queen on her throne, a glass dangling lazily in one hand. 2 of her friends from her book club, or what used to be a book club, were sprawled across the armchairs, shrieking with laughter over a story that clearly had nothing to do with literature. The smell of cheap wine, popcorn, and expensive perfume hung heavy in the air. None of them noticed me at first. I stood in the hallway for a moment, my shoes still on, backpack slung over one shoulder. My head hurt from the weight of the day, from the memories at the graveyard, from the truth Trish had reminded me of. I just wanted to crawl into bed and escape. But the noise, the sound of Darla's high-pitched cackle sliced through the air, followed by the crash of a wine glass toppling off the coffee table. I stepped forward slowly, holding onto the edge of the wall. "Excuse me," I said quietly. No one heard. I cleared my throat. "Could you please keep it down? It's really late." Darla turned mid-laugh, one perfectly penciled eyebrow arched. "Oh, look who decided to grace us with her presence," she slurred. Her friends stifled giggles. I tried again, keeping my tone calm. "I have an early morning. I'd just appreciate it if you could turn the volume down a bit." Darla blinked at me, eyes glassy but sharp with something meaner than wine. "You know what your problem is," she said, standing up unsteadily. "You think this house belongs to you." I said nothing. My heartbeat quickened, but I stood my ground. Her voice rose, mocking. "You walk around here like some martyr, folding your little laundry, whispering your little lectures. Guess what, sweetheart? You don't run this place." One of her friends chuckled awkwardly. "Darla, maybe we should." "No," she snapped, still staring at me. "She needs to hear this." I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but before I could, Darla stepped forward and slapped me. Hard. The sound was small, a crack of skin against skin, but it rang in my ears louder than any of their laughter. For a moment, the entire room went still. Even her friends froze. I stood there, stunned, cheek burning, eyes wide. She smirked. "Maybe that'll teach you some respect." My throat closed. I couldn't breathe. I turned without a word and walked straight to my room, hands shaking as I shut the door and pressed my back against it. My legs gave out and I slid to the floor, my breath coming in shallow bursts. In the living room, laughter resumed. Softer now, nervous. One of the women whispered something I couldn't hear. I sat there in the dark, my palm pressed to my face, feeling the sting where her hand had landed. Not because of the pain, but because of the way it made me feel. Small, powerless, erased. But even in that moment, something deeper stirred. Not rage, not yet, resolve. It wasn't just about her anymore. It wasn't even about the slap. It was the years of silence. The birthdays ruined. The nights I folded laundry while they drank and laughed and treated me like background noise. I crawled into bed without brushing my teeth, without changing clothes, too exhausted to move. My whole body buzzed like it had survived a lightning strike. As I stared up at the ceiling, I whispered into the stillness, "This is the last time." And for once, I believed myself. I woke up with the imprint of a decision still resting on my skin. My cheek was less sore, but the memory of Darla's hand was branded deeper than the bruise would show. I lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling in the dim morning light, the silence of the house pressing against my ears. She'd gone too far, and I'd let her for too long. I sat up slowly, pulled on my hoodie, and walked barefoot to the bathroom. The face in the mirror didn't look like someone broken. She looked like someone on the edge of something, someone who just remembered the truth. This house is mine. After brushing my hair into a loose braid, I picked up my phone and stared at the screen. My thumb hovered for a moment before I typed into the search bar, "Realtors near me." There she was, Carla Monroe, local agent. 5 stars. Kind eyes in her photo. I clicked call before I could overthink it. She answered on the second ring. "Carla Monroe speaking." I swallowed hard, but my voice came out steady. "Hi, my name's Ashley Porter. I'd like to list a house. It's time." She was warm, efficient, asked for the address and a few details, said she could be by that afternoon. "Would 3 o'clock work for you?" "Yeah," I said, heart racing. "Perfect." After hanging up, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall for a long time. My palms were damp, my legs tingled. But underneath all that was something new, something electric, control. I had taken a step, and for once it hadn't been backward. At 2:45, I opened all the blinds in the front room and wiped down the countertops. The house looked better in the sunlight. Not perfect, but no longer hidden in shadows. I'd made sure to clear the living room of the empty wine bottles Darla had left behind and stuffed them into a trash bag that now sat by the side door, waiting. When the knock finally came, I opened the door with my chin a little higher. Carla was exactly as her picture promised, graying hair in a low ponytail, practical shoes, sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Ashley?" she asked with a warm smile. "Yes, ma'am, come in." She stepped inside, her eyes scanning the space. "It's got good bones," she said. "Lived in, sure, but there's potential." I'd like to sell it quickly, I said. No delays. Understood. Have you spoken with your co-owners or? I held up a folder I'd pulled from the old chest in my room. There are no co-owners. The deed is in my name. My grandmother left it to me. Carla blinked. Oh, well, that makes things easier. I nodded once. They just don't know it yet. She raised an eyebrow but didn't push, just flipped through the folder and nodded. We'll start the paperwork today. I'll walk you through it. I showed her around the house like a hostess, steady and calm. The kitchen, the den, the spare room that Darla had filled with dusty books and broken lamps. I kept my voice even, describing things in terms of potential. We were halfway through the hallway when Darla appeared. She was wearing a satin robe and fuzzy slippers, mascara smudged from last night, a mug of coffee in her hand that read World's Best Wife, a mug she'd taken from Grandma's old cabinet. Her voice was already raised. What the hell is going on? Carla turned politely. Good afternoon, I'm Carla Monroe, realtor. Darla blinked. Realtor, Ashley, what is this? Why is there a stranger in my house? I turned to face her fully, the hallway light casting shadows behind me. My hands didn't shake, my voice didn't waver. It's not your house, I said evenly. It's mine, and I'm selling it. Darla's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Carla cleared her throat. Ms. Porter, we can continue the walkthrough in the sunroom if that's all right. Of course, I said, stepping aside. Darla stood frozen in the hallway, her coffee forgotten. Her eyes followed us like she was trying to make sense of the ground shifting beneath her feet. I didn't offer an explanation. I didn't owe her one. That night, the garage door slammed harder than usual. I was upstairs, sitting on the edge of my bed with the deed folder still clutched in my lap. I'd gone over it a dozen times already. Each line of legal text, each notarized page, felt like a small breath of oxygen in a house that had smothered me for years. Downstairs, I heard her voice first, low, urgent, theatrical. She's bringing strangers into our house, Bill, realtors. She's trying to sell the floor right out from under us. Then came the dramatic sob, the kind she pulled out whenever cornered. I couldn't hear his reply. His voice was always quieter, like he'd trained it to blend into walls. But then, footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming up the stairs, a soft knock. Ash! I didn't answer right away. My heart was already pounding. But then I stood and opened the door. My father stood there, looking older than he had that morning. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes puffy. What are you doing? He asked. No anger, just confusion layered in fatigue. I'm selling the house, I replied calmly. He rubbed his hand across the back of his neck like he didn't want to believe it. You can't just make a decision like that without talking to us. There is no us on the deed, I said, holding up the folder. Just me. He looked at it like it might bite. Where'd you get that? Grandma's chest, I said, where it's been sitting since the day she died. He shook his head slowly. That can't be right. That house, she would have told me. She did, I said, voice soft but firm. You just weren't listening. We stood there in the quiet, the hallway light casting a long shadow between us. I never meant for things to get this bad, he said finally. But you let them, I replied. Every day, you let her treat me like I was less. You watched it happen. His eyes dropped. I didn't want the fight, I nodded. You avoided the fight and handed it to me. There was a beat of silence, and then he did something I didn't expect. He pulled out his phone. What are you doing? Calling Larry, he said. Your grandmother's lawyer, if this is true. I need to hear it from him. He walked down the hallway into his room and shut the door behind him. I sat down on the edge of my bed, hands still clenched in my lap. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. I stared at the crack under his door like I could will an answer through it. Finally, the door opened. Bill walked out, phone still in hand, his face pale. His lips parted like he wanted to say something, but no words came. It's true, I asked. He gave the smallest nod. All of it. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time in years, not as a daughter, not as a problem, but as someone who had been carrying more than he'd ever bothered to ask about. I didn't know, he murmured. I should have read the will. You should have been a father, I whispered, not a bystander. He opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to defend himself, but no sound came out. And in that silence, I knew something had changed. Not everything, not enough, but something. The truth was no longer just mine. It was his now, too. The next morning, the house smelled like cinnamon and fake apologies. Darla was in the kitchen, wearing a pastel cardigan that looked 2 sizes too soft for the woman beneath it. Her hair was brushed, her lipstick perfect. She was pouring orange juice into 2 glasses like we were about to have a brunch date instead of a reckoning. I stepped into the room and immediately felt the chill beneath the surface. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said, her voice sticky sweet. "I made breakfast. Figured we could sit down and talk, just us girls." I didn't answer. Just reached for the toaster and dropped in 2 slices of bread, keeping my movements slow. She tried again, voice gentler this time. "Look, I know we've had our differences, but let's not do anything rash, okay?" I turned to face her fully. "You mean like trying to sell the house I legally own?" She blinked, smile faltering. "That's not what I meant." I took a deep breath. "I have a showing in 2 hours. Carla's bringing a couple to see the place." Her mouth tightened. "Ashley, think about what you're doing. This is your home." "No," I said calmly. "It's the house. It stopped being a home when I became your target practice." Her jaw tensed. She tried again, softer. "I know I haven't been perfect. You've been cruel." Her eyes narrowed just for a second before she reassembled her mask. "I only ever wanted what was best for this family." "Then please," I said, picking up my toast, "don't be here when the buyers arrive, and if you are, don't embarrass yourself trying to pretend this is your space." She stared at me, searching my face for the old version of me, the one who shrank under her voice, who folded laundry in silence and apologized for breathing too loudly. That girl wasn't standing in this kitchen anymore. "Clear the clutter," I added, walking past her toward the hallway. "We both know there's a lot of it." By the time Carla arrived, the air in the house had changed. Sunlight filtered in through the clean windows. The scent of lemon cleaner masked the usual mustiness. I wore a simple white blouse and jeans, nothing flashy, but clean, composed, present. Every part of me said, I belong here. The couple Carla brought, mid-40s, polite, curious, walked through the front door and shook my hand like I was a professional, like I was someone who mattered. "This is the main living area," I said, leading them inside. "Original wood floors, big windows, and it gets amazing light in the morning." I felt Darla's presence before I saw her. She was curled up in the far corner of the couch, pretending to cry into a tissue like she'd just received devastating news. It would have been believable if the tears weren't as dry as her wineglass from last night. "Ignore her," I said with a small smile. "She won't be here much longer." The couple gave me a curious glance but said nothing. I kept the tour moving. The master bedroom, the kitchen, the backyard with its faded fairy lights and overgrown garden. Each room I entered, I stood a little taller. My voice got steadier. Every sentence was a step forward, a reclaiming of space. Back in the living room, Darla let out a sniffle just as we were wrapping up. "I just don't know where we'll go," she murmured. I didn't even look at her. "Thank you so much for coming," I told the buyers. "Let me know if you'd like to schedule a second visit." As I walked them out, I caught my reflection in the hall mirror. There I was, still the same girl, same hair, same face, but different now. No longer invisible, no longer apologizing, and finally standing in my own home like I belonged. The sun was setting when it happened. Light spilled through the kitchen window in streaks of gold and fire, casting long shadows across the tile floor. I stood at the sink rinsing glasses from the showing, still in the same clothes, heart still pounding. The buyers hadn't made a decision, but that wasn't the victory I needed. I'd made it through. I'd stood tall. And Darla hated that. She hadn't said a word since the couple left. She slinked around the house like a storm cloud, too quiet, too calm. I could feel her brewing. Then right on cue, the garage door opened. Bill stepped in, looking uncertain, as if he expected a grenade to go off. Darla was already waiting in the living room. "Perfect timing," she said, voice sharp with mock cheer. "You'll want to hear this." I stayed where I was, dish towel in hand, heart bracing for impact. "She's trying to throw me out," Darla said, pacing in her robe. "Can you believe that, me, after everything I've done for this house?" She gestured around like she'd built it brick by brick. Bill looked between us, unsure. Then slowly he walked to my side. "I know," he said quietly. Darla blinked. "What?" "I know she owns it," he said, louder now. "I called the lawyer. It's hers. It always was." Darla's face paled like she'd been slapped. "You take a stand," she spat. "That's rich." Her laugh was bitter, ugly. "You've been spineless for years, Bill. You can barely decide what to eat for dinner, and now suddenly you're a moral compass." Bill didn't answer. He just stayed where he was, hands in his pockets, eyes lowered but beside me. And that somehow was enough. Darla turned to me, fury twisting her features. "And you think this makes you powerful. You think being right means you win." I took a slow breath, set the dish towel down, and stepped forward. "No," I said. "What makes me powerful is that I don't need to scream to be heard anymore." Her mouth opened, ready to spit another insult, but I beat her to it. "This is no longer your home." And then, without hesitation, I walked to the front door, opened it wide, and turned back to her. "Leave." She stared at me, stunned. "You don't get to stay here, drink wine, insult me, and pretend this house is yours. Not anymore." She stepped forward, rage in her eyes. "You little." I didn't flinch. I simply placed one hand on her shoulder and guided her out the door. She stumbled slightly on the mat but caught herself. Outside, the sky was bruised with twilight and the porch light flickered to life. She turned back to scream, something foul on her tongue, but the door clicked shut between us. I locked it. My fingers trembled on the bolt, but I didn't waver. Behind me, silence, then Bill's voice. "It's about time someone did what I couldn't." I turned to face him. He looked tired, worn, but something in his expression had shifted. Like he saw me, really saw me, for the first time in years. I nodded, barely breathing. "This house," I said, voice low but sure, "will never be a place of cruelty again." And for the first time in forever, the house was quiet. Not the silence of fear. The silence of peace. The porch light buzzed above her like a spotlight, casting harsh shadows across her face. Darla stood outside, rage twisting her mouth, fists clenched, her robe flapping in the breeze like a tattered flag of war. "You'll regret this," she screamed, voice shrill enough to rattle the windows. "You think you've won? You're nothing but a selfish, ungrateful brat." I stood just inside the doorway, hand still resting on the lock. Through the glass panel, I could see her pacing back and forth, a silhouette of fury and disbelief. She banged on the door with the side of her fist. "Open this damn door, Ashley." I didn't move. "Bill, do something. You're really going to let her do this to me?" I turned my head slightly. My father was standing a few feet behind me in the hallway, silent, pale, but he didn't come to her defense. He didn't reach for the door. Instead, his eyes were fixed on mine. Outside, Darla screamed again. The words didn't matter anymore, just noise. The same noise I'd lived under for years, dismissive, poisoned, loud enough to drown me if I let it. But I didn't. I stood there and watched her unravel. And I did nothing, not out of cruelty, but because, for once, I didn't need to explain myself. She had built her power in this house on my silence, and I wasn't silent anymore. After a few more minutes, her voice cracked, her fists fell, and she finally backed away. Still hurling insults, still playing the victim, but retreating nonetheless. She walked down the porch steps, muttering under her breath, and disappeared into the night. I turned the deadbolt. The sound of it echoed like a punctuation mark. Final. Then I leaned my forehead against the door, exhaling all the breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Behind me, Bill cleared his throat. "Ashley, I don't know what to say." I turned slowly. His eyes were glassy, not from tears exactly, but from something heavier. Regret, maybe, recognition. "It's not your house anymore either," I said. "But you can stay, for now, if you want to do better." He nodded once. "I do." The quiet that followed wasn't awkward. It felt earned. "I meant what I said," I whispered. "This house will never be a place of cruelty again." He looked around like he was seeing the living room for the first time, truly seeing it. The old photos, the floral couch Grandma once picked, the crooked lamp that still leaned in the corner. "It already feels different," he said softly. I didn't answer. I just stepped away from the door and walked through the house slowly, flipping off lights one by one. The kitchen. The hallway, the living room. It was mine now. And in the silence that followed, I could hear something I hadn't in years. My own voice steady in my chest. The next morning, I was sipping coffee at the kitchen table when I heard the knock. Not pounding, just a light, calculated tap. The kind that pretends not to intrude but fully expects the door to open. I knew it was her before I looked. Darla. Through the narrow window beside the front door, I saw her standing there. Her hair was neat, makeup minimal, dressed in jeans and a sweater she hadn't worn since Thanksgiving 2 years ago when she was still pretending to play happy family. I opened the door halfway. Her eyes were swollen, red-rimmed, but dry, no tears. "Ashley," she said softly, "can we talk?" I didn't move. She clasped her hands in front of her. I wanted to apologize for last night, for all of it. I raised an eyebrow. She cleared her throat. I was angry, scared. I didn't mean what I said. I leaned against the doorframe. "Which part? That I was nothing, or that I'd regret finally standing up to you?" Darla flinched. "That wasn't fair. I lost control. But this is still my life, too. I've lived here for years." "On someone else's generosity," I said. "I'm not here to fight," she added quickly. I don't have anywhere to go. I'll leave, I promise. I just need a few days. A week, tops." Her voice had that tremble she used to charm Bill during arguments. The carefully constructed vulnerability, but it didn't work on me anymore. "I'm not selling the house," I said. Her eyes widened. "You're not?" I shook my head. "No, I was going to, but then I realized I don't need to leave. You do." She blinked, confused. "I'm staying and I'm rebuilding. This house won't be on the market. It'll be mine again the way Grandma wanted it." "But," she started. I held up a hand. "You don't get to manipulate your way back in. You don't get to cry your way into a grace period. This isn't your stage anymore." Her lips trembled. "So that's it." "That's it," I said calmly. "You had your chance. You took and burned every bridge behind you. I'm not giving you more time to light another match." She swallowed hard, nodded slowly, then turned and walked down the porch steps. No theatrics this time, just silence. I watched her until she turned the corner at the end of the street. Then I closed the door and turned the lock. The house was still. Not silent like before, when silence meant submission, but quiet like a clean room after a storm, like breath after drowning. I walked through the hallway slowly, running my fingers along the edges of the wall. There were still scuff marks, still peeling paint, still reminders of every slammed door and stifled scream. But they weren't stronger than me anymore. Later that afternoon, I opened all the windows, let the air shift. I tossed old wine glasses into the donation box, scrubbed the kitchen floor until it stopped looking like someone else's territory. And when I sat back down at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee, I exhaled without shaking. This house wasn't just a building. It was proof that I was never weak for surviving, and I was never meant to stay small just to keep others comfortable. The walls are pale blue now. It took me 3 weekends, 4 paint rollers, and more YouTube tutorials than I care to admit, but they're finally the shade I dreamed of as a little girl. Not the kind of blue that hides, the kind that breathes, that lets light in. The old floral couch is gone. So is the dusty china cabinet and every last trace of Darla's faux elegance that never belonged here to begin with. In their place, warmth, color, softness, my home. It still surprises me sometimes. I'll be stirring a pot of jam at the stove or tying my apron before sunrise and catch a glimpse of myself in the window. Hair in a bun, eyes alert, sleeves dusted with flour. And I'll realize I've become someone I used to imagine in quiet moments. Someone free. I didn't sell the house. I transformed it. The kitchen I once dreaded, the same kitchen where I stood silently washing dishes while laughter spilled from the living room, is now the heart of my new life. I opened a small home bakery this spring. Blue Porch Sweets, named after the color of the front steps I painted the day after Darla left. It started slow. Neighbors dropped by out of curiosity. A couple from the next block came back the next day for more of my peach scones. Then someone asked if I could make a birthday cake. Then another. And another. Now 3 mornings a week my table is full, with trays of cookies, boxes of muffins, handwritten orders taped above the sink, and more importantly, with people. Real people. Smiling faces. Local teens who stop by for brownies and leave with advice. Older women who bring their knitting and stay just to chat. Even Mr. Connor from 2 doors down, who once called me that quiet girl with the sad eyes, now calls me the boss of Butter Lane. They don't know the whole story. I don't offer it unless they ask. But I think they sense it in the way I guard this space, in the way I smile but don't flinch, in the way I let sunlight in but never compromise on the rules. My rules. I keep the front room clear and bright. No shouting aloud inside. No sarcasm passed off as humor. No one gets to laugh at someone else's expense. Those rules aren't printed anywhere, but everyone knows them. I've rewritten the house's language, and people respect it. Bill still lives here, quietly. respectfully. He takes his coffee on the back porch most mornings and leaves before the bakery opens. He's never apologized in the grand, cinematic way people expect, but he does little things. He mows the lawn before I can ask, replaces light bulbs, fixes squeaky hinges. And every Saturday, without fail, he leaves a bouquet of peonies by the kitchen door. We don't talk about it, we don't have to. And once a month, I visit Grandma. The cemetery's quieter now than it used to feel. Maybe because I bring peace with me. I kneel beside her stone, place a new bunch of peonies in the little vase, and tell her what's new. Sometimes I laugh. Sometimes I cry. Sometimes I sit there and just breathe. I thank her every time, not just for the house, but for the truth. For remembering me when everyone else tried to forget. For giving me the keys not just to a building, but to myself. Some nights I walk through the rooms barefoot, lights low, the scent of baked sugar lingering in the air. I look at the framed photo of her above the mantel and whisper, "We're okay now, we're really okay." And in that stillness, I know this home is finally what it was always meant to be. Mine. Safe. Whole. And for anyone else who's ever felt invisible in their own home, let this be your reminder. You don't need to be loud to be strong. You don't need permission to reclaim your space. Sometimes the quietest girl carries the sharpest truth. And sometimes justice doesn't roar. It simply stands.